All right, welcome to lesson 4.1 on functions, and now we're going to look at what we call the absolute value function. And so we need to talk a little bit about this. You'll notice these vertical lines here. These are kind of like parentheses, but they do have an important job. So let's say we had a person. You're going to be blessed with my fine artwork here. Here's our person. And let's say we wanted to measure the person's height. So I take a tape measure from the ground and I go up and I bring it up even with their head. And let's say it says 6 feet tall. So this person is 6 feet tall. What if I took the tape measure and I put it up here even with the top of the head and I went down? Would they be negative 6 feet tall? No. We don't do negative distances. They are either 6 feet tall or they're not, right? There's no such thing as a negative 6 feet. If you're measuring the length of a board, it doesn't matter which end you measure it from. You will have a positive number. So there are cases where negative numbers don't make sense. And when we talk about somebody's height, when we talk about the length of a board, we never use negative numbers because you can't have a negative piece of wood. You can't have a negative person. I mean, people can be negative, but you can't be a negative person. You either exist and have height, or you don't exist, zero. But there's no negative. So that's what this means. So instead of writing out, we can't have any negative numbers here. That seems wordy, right? So we could say, what do I want to write? I'm going to write it down here. So what if you have a situation where your number can't be negative? So let's say we're going to use x as our variable, and we could say x can't be negative. So we could do that. We can say, hey, if you get a negative number, no, you have to treat it as a positive. That's really what we're doing. Well, what's another way we could say that? We could say x has to be greater than 0. This is another way we can say that. So saying greater than 0, we're saying x can only be positive. So we can do stuff like that. But what mathematicians wound up doing is coming up with what they call an absolute value. An absolute value are two vertical lines. They act like parentheses. That's one thing that they do. But they make sure that whatever you get here, whatever's in here, that you use it as a positive value. So, must use as a positive. So let's take a look at some examples. So if I said negative 5 in absolute values, what is the absolute value of negative 5? The answer is 5. Because this absolute value says, nope, you can't use negative 5. You have to use it as a positive number. And that's what it does. That's all that symbol means. All right, let's do this. What if I said absolute value of 7? Well, what does this mean? You can only use it as a positive number. Well, it's already positive. Great, awesome. We don't have to do anything to it. So if it's negative, this means no, you're not going to use a negative. You're going to use this as a positive. And if it's positive, okay, that's fine then. We don't have to do anything with it. Now I want to show you one other thing because we got to be careful. What if I have 5 minus 7 in an absolute value? Well, think about order of operations. Order of operations says we do what first? Parentheses. So you cannot use the absolute value until you simplify what's in here to a single value. So we can't use the absolute value to cancel this subtraction right now because there's two different values. You're going to have to do the math first. So 5 minus 7, that's a war. Negatives win. 2 negatives would be left over. So we simplify this down to negative 2 to a single value, and then our answer is 2. That's what we're going to do with our absolute values. Now, we're ready to go up to the table. I selected these x values because they will work well with the graph and they're going to give you good points. They're not all x values. Oh, I apologize. Excuse me. Not every x value is always going to give you a point on the graph. We saw that earlier with some of those values, right? So these I specifically picked so that you would get nice, neat points on the graph. So let's start with f of -7. So we're going to have 2, absolute value, -7 plus 4, absolute value. What do we do first? We do what's inside. So -7 plus 4, that is a war, and the negatives win. Now that we've simplified this, we're ready to do our absolute value. What's the absolute value of -3? It's 3. And we're going to change the absolute value to a parentheses. This is still multiplication. This is 2 times whatever this winds up being. So you do evaluate the absolute value after the parentheses step. And now 2 times 3 is 6. So f of -7 is 6. And we can add that to our table. Well, now we have to do the same thing with -6. f of -6 is 2. Absolute value of -6 plus 4. Simplify what's inside, so that's 2 times -2 in absolute values. What's the absolute value of -2? It's 2. Put in parentheses. 2 times 2 is 4. So -6, when -6 is your input, your output is 4. So go ahead and continue on these. I'm just going to pause the video and start plugging in these other values. And then once you have the table filled out, plot your points, and then we'll check on that together. All right, so hopefully you have finished going through these. I'm going to work through the rest of them. I'm going to go a little bit fast on them, just so we can finish this problem, because I know there's a lot of points we're doing here. So f of -5, and that is going to be 2, -5 plus 4. This is going to be -1, which is then going to be 2 times -1, which is -2. So f of -5, nope, sorry, I did that wrong. I say I went too fast and I made a mistake. Slow it down. The absolute value of -1 is +1. That's what absolute values do. And so your result is 2. So we have 5, 2. Now it looks like you might start to see a pattern. We'll want to be real careful with this though. Let's go ahead and do f of -4, which is 2, and then it's -4 plus 4. -4 plus 4 is 0. So this winds up being 2 times 0, which is 0. So f of -4 is 0. And we can add 0 to our table. Oh, broke my pencil lead. This is where it gets interesting. I'm going to come over here for this one. F of -3 is 2 times -3 plus 4. That is a war, and the positives win. And that's just going to be a 1, right? A positive 1. And so 2 times 1 is 2. So f of -3 winds up being 2. And I'll add that to my table. F of -2 is equal to 2 absolute value, -2 plus 4, which winds up being 2 times 2, which is 4. F of -2 is 4, sorry. And we'll put this here. And then for this one, it does wind up being 6, if you plug that in. And so this does have kind of an interesting shape to it. So it looked like it was just going to continue to decrease by 2s, but then here it starts increasing again. Let's graph these points. -7, 6. That's this point here. -6, 4. -5, 2. -4, 0. -3, 2. -2, 4. And -1, 6. So that's actually the shape of that graph. And it does look like a V. And in this case, I'm not going to curve these. This graph actually does have, it's like a line, but it's really like two lines. Starting from this point, it'll go this way with the slope of 2. And it'll go this way. And here the slope is -2. But that's what an absolute value graph looks like. So what would you guys be expected to do? I mean, really, just be able to plug these values in, simplify down the answers, make a table, and plot the points. That's really what we're looking for here. And then we want to interpret this. What is f of 2? And then what is f of x? What is x if f of x equals 0? So go ahead and find those values from your table. I'll give you a second, and then we'll talk about the answers. All right, so for this one here, if we went up to the table, we're at f of 2. Hey, it's not on here. Well, then we're going to actually have to do the work for it, right? So we're going to have to do f of 2 equals, and then we'll have to put 2, absolute value of 2 plus 4. And then we do what's inside, so that gives me a 6. So it's 2, absolute value of 6. And the absolute value of 6 is just 6. So it's just 6 times 2, which is 12. So f of 2 is 12. So sometimes those values aren't going to be in the table, right? So you're going to just have to do the work to find them. So f of 2 equals 12. This one here, what is x when f of x equals 0? So if we go to our table, well, this is when f of x equals 0. So our x value is -4. So we'll put in -4 here. All right, oops, sorry. All right, I think we've just got one more page to go, so please continue on to the video for page 6.